Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to Raising Excellence, the most important hour and a half of your day now. I'm Michael, the MC and Opportunity Ambassador for today's adventure. And today's show is Are you succumbing to the conditioning or are you thinking for yourself? An introduction to ethical emergence. But before we get into that, let me introduce to you my co host. Our first is Agnieszka, our psychosomatic illuminator,
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here.
Willow, our trauma consultant,
Hi, everyone.
Dennis, our freedom facilitator,
Blessed love. Great to be here with you.
and Deirdre is going to be coming along shortly.
She's coming in right now. She just rang
Oh,
the doorbell. So if we just
okay.
wait,
Here
one,
she comes.
two, and connecting
Let's,
to audio.
so
That's
as soon as
okay. It
Deirdre
takes our
connects,
listeners a minute to come on anyway. So, the more fluff at the beginning, the better. Deirdre,
well,
welcome.
I'm still walking. Hey guys, thanks for coming. Glad you're here. I'm gonna keep walking
Switch the
to my
speaker.
spot.
we're in the show. So
Yeah.
welcome.
Oh god. Okay.
All right. So for those of you that are viewing live and have a question or a comment, feel free to throw that in the chat or the comments, and we will try and address that throughout the show. Today it's my show, so I'm going to be leading the way. This is something that I have my heart and soul into. It's a lot about all of my experiences as well as all my knowledge and background. But I'll start off with a little bit of a story about fish. And, there's an experiment they do where they take a tank of water and they put a glass divider in between it. And on one side, they put a northern pike walleye. And on the other side, they put minnows, which is their favorite food.
What's a northern park walleye? What is that?
It's a rather large predator that is predominantly in Canada, freshwater fish.
Fish. Okay, cool.
But anyway, the pike will try and go for the minnow, but he'll bash his head into the glass partition. And so after a while of beating his face into the glass partition, he stops doing that. And when that happens, they remove the glass partition and the minnows swim around. And even if they swim right up to the northern pike or the walleye, he won't eat them. In fact, he'll starve to death before figuring out that he's in an abundant environment. And so that is a perfect example for what I would consider conditioning. And it really is kind of an idea of breaking the will of that animal. And unfortunately, conditioning is and programming is part of our environment as humans. And it is kind of a dividing line between us using our big human brain and our smaller kind of fish or reptile brain. And for a lot of people, that involves a lot of things that we react to are effectively conditioning. So, like a lot of people, when they are triggered, they hear words, their emotions get involved, and they think thoughts, or they have feelings, and they're offended, or they get angry, or they do things. Those, in a large part, are conditioned responses, and so it's an unfortunate reality, but a lot of people are conditioned. And so ethical emergence is one in which, and we read my kind of vision statement for ethical emergence. The vision of ethical emergence is to help people discern value from harm and allow people to embrace and incorporate beneficial habits and practices into their lives and allow their good ideas to become reality. In doing so, allowing them to understand their infinite potential. And so let me share my screen real quickly here. I've lost my. If you don't mind, can I? All right. Here we go.
What do you need? I'm
I'm
here.
sharing my screen.
Whoa.
So I've got ethical emergencies really involves 7 different areas. And today we're going to cover the first 3, which are journaling, which everybody's really familiar with, meaningful communication, and the third one is called digging deep. And so then we'll do the other 3 we'll do the other 3 and then kind of throw in a little ad for the last one as a bonus on Wednesday. But talking about journaling, I've been kind of shepherding you guys through this journaling experience that you've had, and I've actually come upon some new information. In fact, I was just in a meeting, a group meeting on Saturday, and I was talking to a couple people, and he said, "Do you know that typing like introduces or like exercises 2 neural pathways, while writing does like 20?" And I was like, "What?" And so I kind of had to look that up, and sure enough, that's the case. There's a lot of benefits to writing. So I'm actually kind of changing my opinion of how people might journal, and really suggesting that more people journal by actually physically writing out whatever it is that they're thinking about, because of the fact that it creates such a more robust neural pathway. It's like, instead of like having a bike path, you're creating like a super highway.
That's why they say ink it, link it, sink it, right? Like that saying, ink it, link it, sink it. It means when you write it down, you ink it, you link the neural pathways, and then it sinks the information into your brain.
Yeah.
So I'd like to tie this, of course, back to trauma. This is why people who have experienced traumatic events in their past, especially the more of them, writing it down and journaling can actually trigger more flashbacks, because it actually triggers all the same neural pathways when you're talking about it. Like sometimes it can trigger less neural pathways to talk about the experience than it does to write it down. So that I thought that was interesting, that there are a lot of neural pathways that are used when you're writing stuff down.
Yeah, and like you were talking about, Agnieszka, these are things that have been kind of known for a long time, kind of myths and legends of sort, and kind of, but it wasn't until the 70s when they were able to do MRIs that they were actually able to confirm that, like, there's a great deal more brain activity due to things like writing. But I don't know. Does anybody have any other feelings about, the idea of journaling and the idea of increasing your neural pathways, and how that might impact your, the practice of journaling?
I think Deirdre wanted to say something earlier, but I do have something to add as well.
Me too.
You guys have. I'm trying to keep my hair out of my face.
You look cute though.
Yeah, you look lovely. I love that dress.
Yeah, I got a dress and I got boots.
Oh, look at you.
Nice.
Yeah,
this is where we're getting more subscribers every day.
As we should.
It's going up.
That is a finely made dress and finely made boots, and clothing should be appreciated, especially if it fits you correctly and has pockets.
Finely made lady.
I'm glad I can entertain them, please. Go, guys, continue.
So, with the writing it down, oh, I lost my train of thought. Deirdre totally distracted me, and I'm not even a guy. Go figure. Oh yeah, with the goals, they say that if you write down your goals, it'll actually help you with achieving them. Like, goals written are achieved more often than goals not written. And the other thing that I learned in elementary school, because in Poland growing up, there was in the 80s, there was this whole culture about doing cheat sheets for school, and school was considered to be too difficult for kids to pass without like cheating and stuff. I don't know why. It was weird. It was like some against government thing that everybody did. And so, but our teachers would actually encourage us to make cheat sheets. And what happened most of the time is once I made all the cheat sheets and wrote all the formulas and analyzed how to put it on the cheat sheet so that it would be easily accessible, I actually didn't need the cheat sheet anymore because the action of making it caused me to memorize the information. So often...
I experienced the same thing.
Me too. It pissed me off too because I was like, I got halfway through the test and I was like, I don't think I'm going to need that stupid cheat sheet that I stayed up until like 4 a.m. writing down like in this awkward spot on my body so that no one can see it. And I've got this master plan. I
wrote it on my hand, you know.
It's like I've got this master plan that I didn't even get to deploy because I actually learned the information, the exact thing I was trying not to do.
Did you ever write it on your leg and wear a short skirt? Because the male teachers can't look up in your skirt, right?
No,
I had like a big jumper, and like then it was like the paper was in the pocket, and then it was either a tissue. They couldn't say anything. It's a tissue.
We always wrote ours and slipped them inside the packaging of the water bottles. So when you look at it through the side of it, you can read it. And they're like, not a lot of people will tell you. That's why our school started being like, no drinks and snacks in the testing rooms.
Yeah, well, you know, so in regard to like incorporating this into a daily practice or habit, you know, journaling is like where I begin. And because it is such a powerful habit that works in so many positive ways for people, that's where I begin. And it's essentially my anchor habit for helping people start to change their lives in a positive way and really start to, you know, acknowledge all the other things that they're doing in their daily lives that, you know, may be harmful, you know, or just not very beneficial to them versus things that are incredibly beneficial. And then try and get the you know,
balance,
the habit of just being observant and being able to write that down and seeing how much, you know, cognitive response that gets. You know, we were talking about this in the planning session about, you know, the difference between the human, which is this massive neocortex, which is most of our brain, and the smaller like animal brains that are kind of within. But that is really kind of the key to this little example I had at the beginning with the fish, is a lot of the things that's going on in the world are triggering our animal brain and essentially are additional conditioning, and really they're traumatizing us by creating examples where fear is, you know, present, so that these neural pathways that go to our neocortex and are what, you know, make us human are less and less utilized. And so we become more like the fish and less like the human. And so that's
So for those who are not familiar with the brain structure, the brain stem and a small area above it are called the reptilian brain most often. And when you're studying the brain neurology or something like that, it's called the reptilian brain. And
do the hand example. I can't because I'm holding my phone.
Yeah, so it's like the brain stem, and then there's a little head on it. And so that's why they call it a fish.
The spinal column at the top is like your
the
fish brain or your reptile brain.
Yeah, and then that encompasses your fight or flight reactions, and it's got the amygdala in it and all that. And then the next level up is the mammalian brain, which controls most of the biological functions and things like that. And then
this is your limbic system.
Your limbic system.
And it controls your responses, your emotional responses. So your fight or flight is like the amygdala and the reptilian brain, and then it goes into your limbic system, and this affects a lot of your hormones, I think it affects your pituitary gland, your hypothalamus,
and
a couple of others. I need to do more research about the brain, but yeah, it covers all your emotional, instinctual feelings.
And Oscar says it's the oldest part of our brains, which is also true.
The reptilian part of your brain is actually the oldest.
Yeah.
The limbic system is the mammalian brain. So as long as mammals have been out,
that sits on top. That sits on top of the reptile brain. So I can't do two hands. So can somebody?
Yeah, it's like that, and then
like
over
this.
that, and then you have the neocortex, which it controls your processing of the external world.
Yeah, and that's separate.
And also your logic and reason.
Is the ganglia. The only part that touches that. The actual grey matter doesn't actually touch those other parts. Yeah, it's separated by fascia, all the parts as well. It's really cool.
That makes sense.
Nice.
Yeah, so the idea there is to really create the habits that really start to increase those neural pathways to your human brain and your logic and reasoning, which is in your neocortex, which it's unfortunate, but like long-term and critical thinking are all in those areas. And this is another thing that a lot of people are being, shied away from. And if you look at attention spans, they're incredibly small. Well, that's because nobody's using their neural cortex at a large, at a long-term level. They're just barely.
And that regular input, that regular gathering information and then putting it back and then pulling it back out again, it's creating stronger connections. They're getting one connection, and that's to observe.
Yeah, that's kind of, as I proceed through this, you're going to see that that's kind of one of the things that I'm trying to do is exercise this in a various different ways in which, again, strengthens the ability and really kind of gives you the opportunity to kind of really create your own superpowers. And, there's a word that I really love. It's savoir-faire, which is knowing how to do something, or, knowing how to do the right thing in any situation.
That makes the All-Around Company song make a lot more sense now. I never knew what that meant. But as soon as you said it, I was like, oh yeah, that song started playing through my head. I was like, that makes a lot of sense because he's teaching this cat how to deal with the streets of New York and just make the right choice at the right time.
Yeah. That's interesting too. In capoeira, that is one description one could give to one of the virtues or one of the states, I guess, one of the highest states that you could achieve, which is to have manjinga, which is to have to have trickery, to have kindness, but also it's exactly what they said, is to know what to do. And that could be, it could be in terms of movement, but it could be also in terms of posturing, the inner or the outer posturing in a specific situation. It's the master is the one who knows exactly what to do at what point of the game, and that's when experience becomes wisdom, and then the master kind of beats or is able to overcome the one that might be physically fitter or younger or tougher, but because he has manjinga, he has that experience, that wisdom, and he just knows what to do at what point of the game.
Yeah. And, honestly, this is a whole area that I think a lot of people are unaware of because they're, inundated with media and so forth about, the constant fighting and, sex and all the things that you get in the media, like a old world sheriff from the Old West. For the most part, most of the old world sheriffs didn't even wear a gun. Now, does that sound like a complete, total opposite of what to think? But the reality is that they had that kind of savoir-faire where they were able to kind of judge people, understand what the circumstances are, not represent any kind of threat, but be able to kind of talk through the situation and diffuse it, and never even have to, pull out a gun or create any kind of circumstance where violence was necessary. In my book, violence is a desperate act, and using force is a desperate act, and it's a lack of creativity, it's a lack of awareness, and so by by really upping our awareness and upping our consciousness, we allow ourselves to create the kind of circumstance where we can see things that otherwise we wouldn't see.
It's also a violent act is always based in fear. It always comes out of fear.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
Oh, I was just reminded of my jiu-jitsu classes and my firearm training, because one of the coolest things about one of my instructors is he said, I know jiu-jitsu and I know how to kill a man, but the point of this is I don't want to have to do that. I don't want to have to use these skills to do that. And it's very similar like with the gun. I do carry around a gun and I hope I never have to use it. But like, I kind of lost my train of thought with that. Oh, but knowing you have that and knowing that is like, if someone pushes you, that's where that option is going to go, gives you the mental clarity to be like, all right, it's my responsibility because I can to de-escalate this situation. Because just like you don't want to get into a fight with someone who you may have to actually, like, maybe they're bigger than you and you may actually have to hurt them a little bit to get them to back off. Like, you don't want to have to do that, but you definitely want to know how to. I'm reminded of the quote about it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And that's the different side of it. Like, not just being paralyzed by not knowing what to do, but like not reacting to past traumas and knowing how to be calm when you know that you can be that warrior, but you're in the garden,
Well, I think, as honestly, I think there's a difference between a warrior and what I would call a hero, which, is essentially somebody that doesn't understand their own mortality, And so like a warrior is one that really understands his own, ability to die. And
tell the monk story. Tell the monk story.
Oh, that's a good one. I don't know.
Which one is the monk? Oh, that'd be.
Or maybe Dennis told that story.
The monk?
Dennis, can you tell the monk story?
Yeah, I want the monk story right now.
Oh, the one we did last time?
Yeah.
That's the monk in the village, and there's this general who is feared for his brutality and for killing people all over the place and invading villages and towns and being ruthless. And he's approaching the little village and everybody is like, hastily like fleeing, running away, and everybody's gone basically, left the village undefended, and the only one who stays back is that little monk. And he lives in a simple hut, so the troops of the general invade, and like they're all upset because nobody's there giving them resistance or fighting them, and they finally gather around the marketplace, and the general is there in front of, surrounded by all his troops. And then this little monk calmly walks down to the middle of the marketplace and stands up right in front of the general, and the general is furious because usually people would just crawl towards him and be begging for their lives, and he like is furious and screams, what's going on here? Are you not afraid? Are you not full of fear? Don't you know who I am? I'm General so and so, and I can kill like that. And then the monk just calmly looks at him and say, well, my name is so and so, and I can die like that. So he was not impressed by that at all. And so it shocked the general so much that it actually it gave him a shift, and it made him look at things from a different perspective, and he would leave him unharmed and just withdraw his troops and went away, and I guess lived his life differently after that.
Yeah, I think that that's it's a perfect example of like how a lot of the world as the violent world is like a game, and when you don't play the game, it's no longer any fun for the people that are they think they're pressing people's buttons or getting one up on somebody else. If it becomes aware that that's not it at all, it's totally, a foolish, endeavor.
It's a difference between power and force.
Yeah, and that's. So, go ahead.
I had actually a couple questions because words are a big, powerful thing in my household, especially specific words. And in our house, violence and force are two different words. They mean two different things. And I've actually had this conversation with a couple of my clients. I've had actually, she's kind of become a friend. So I have this friend who she has gotten angry and lashed out before and hit people. And she's told me numerous times, she's like, I don't want to get that angry. I don't want to do that. And I said, well, here's the thing. I don't want that to happen either, but I'm really glad that you get to tell me when you're upset and when you're angry, because here we get to have this conversation. Do you know what's going to happen if you hit me and I don't deserve it? And she's like, well, no, I don't really know. And she's like, well, you call the cops? I'm like, no, I'll probably hit you back and I'll feel bad about it and we'll have a conversation about it. But I was like, but I would never hit you. Ever. I would never, ever lay a hand on you if you didn't attack me first. And I want you to understand that if someone attacks, she actually used those words. She was like, but that's violence. And I said, no, if someone comes up and hits you and you hit them back, you're not committing violence. You're defending yourself. They are violating you. So using force it doesn't have to be a desperate move. A lot of people use violent action and force when in states of anger, and that is not necessarily good. You don't want, even from a like martial arts position, you don't want to be angry when you're trying to execute a move, because you don't need to be thinking about how you're feeling. You need to know where you need to put your arms and your legs and like keep yourself safe and also keep them safe or do them damage. Like you need to have a clear mind. And that emotional state is the discernment. That's the key to discernment right there.
Yeah, I would say in most cases, if you can subdue the person rather than like harm them, that's a much better approach. But, unfortunately, we're living and we're coming out of a society which is, just inundated with violence and the rage and the confusion and obviously, very much traumatized.
And a lack of consent. There's no teaching of consent in childhood. So you can't expect them to have aggressive emotions and frustration with no outlet. And they've not been taught how to consent when they're dealing with emotional reactions from other people. Like, yeah, it's kind of a recipe for a lot of actual violence and violation to happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, talking about my own experience, I can say that, when I was a young, teenager, and then even into my early 20s, I was, just a total maniac when it came to violence and, and essentially being an alpha male. And, it was like I was constantly fighting with people all the time, and challenging people, to essentially sit on the top of the heap.
So were you like a bully?
In a lot of different instances, I was. I was pretty coy in a lot of cases, but when it came right down to it.
So nobody kind of defined the difference between an alpha male and a bully for you?
Well, I think it had a lot to do with a lot of the, some of the trauma experience and how I, was dealing with it. I just felt very angry a lot of times. And, to me, it was just like, as soon as you trigger me, I'm good,
See,
so
but
like kind of like that situation that Willa was talking about, where you throw a punch at me, I am going to decimate you,
Yeah.
and I'm going to make you pay so bad,
But would that also mean that your parents were reactive like that to stimuli and not asking any personal questions. I'm just saying you learned that kind of reactivity somewhere, right?
Or it could be the opposite. I know a lot of people who have issues controlling their anger, and I ask about their parents, and their parents didn't have angry outbursts. They actually came from a very calm, never heard a single raised voice. And I've kind of figured out, oh, that means that you never learned how to deal with it. You've never been exposed to anger.
Yeah, I think, to the large part, I could say that's true. I mean, there's a lot of kind of maybe psychological turmoil going on in my childhood. But as far as violence was concerned, there was very little. I think I was spanked maybe once or twice as a child.
So, for a child, it doesn't have to be violence. It could be just like quick angry response to stimuli. Like you do something, and instead of going, whoa, we don't do it this way, there is just like backlash, right? There could be different things. I'm just musing.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to stem directly from violence.
Yeah. Yeah. In any case, the thing is that I have that perspective, so I can be a great deal more forgiving of people that are kind of in that situation where, to me now I know that is desperation. That is a lack of creativity. That is just like, it's such a really lonely place to be and a helpless place to be. And it is that it's like being that fish where you're starving and there's abundance all around you, but it's like you've got such a mindset, and I had such a mindset that that was the case. And so like when I'm looking for a fight, I find one, and it was just all the time.
I really relate so much to what you're saying, because I have this same feeling when I see very young girls, and I say very young, I mean mentally, not their age, young girls who they'll do the I'm so helpless, look at me, I'm cute, I can't figure anything out, yeah, the please help me, I'm so adorable, but I'm also gonna like let you just grovel like a dog because it makes me feel better about myself. And I realize why that bothers me so much. And it's because I used to do that. And I was pretty good at it. Most attractive young girls are.
Yep.
And as I became an adult and became more mature and okay with accepting my flaws, I looked back and I saw a huge pattern of manipulating men, and like men that I was seeing, friends. I remember one time when I was very young, I had a friend who told me one time, and I never remember her asking this ever, like before or after. We didn't stay very close friends, but she said that she had a friend who was moving away, like out of state tomorrow. And I made up this story as a kid that I was moving away and I was not gonna, like it was the same situation, just to get like to make her feel bad so that she'd come hang out with me. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, I see why I did that. I was really desperate for friends. I was really lonely. And I felt like my issues mattered more than the pain of not being able to see her friend, because, that could happen to me at any moment. It already has. Yeah, I noticed that pattern of like turning into kind of a bully because it gave me control over a situation. And yes, a lot of it came from desperation, just because you don't know anything else to do and you're just trying to survive, and this is the only way you know how to make social connections or defend yourself, or just deal with your shit that's going on.
Was there a specific point, Willow and Mike also, that you became aware of that kind of conditioning in your life? And then so I'd be interested, like, and what triggered you, or how did you find out? Was there a specific moment or so when it's like, whoa, that's not me, or that's some kind of program running here and it's not beneficial for me? And then what kind of measures did you take to overcome that and to reprogram yourself?
It's like a morning I woke up and I'm all black and blue from head to toe. I recall a particular instance where there was this big party And it was actually a girl that I was dating. It was her birthday, and she had a big, probably like a couple hundred people at her parents' house. And they had like a pool in the back, kind of a wealthy neighborhood. And these party crashers came in, and it was kind of like a local gang. And there was like, I don't know, 10 or 12 of them. And, nobody wanted to face up to him. So I was like, oh, I guess it's time for me, to be the superhero. And I jumped in there, and of course, it was me and one other guy against 12 guys, 10 to 12 guys. Didn't end well, but but that one and a couple others, it was like, why am I doing this? And just something in my head, it's like, I don't know why I'm doing that. And so I had to figure it out, but I number one, I stopped drinking. That was one of the major problems that kind of led me down that path, was alcohol, and again, it's like self-medication, I was self-medicating myself.
For me, it wasn't a day. I'm so envious of your story, because I'm like, man, I wish that I could just be like, I woke up one day and I just wrote something needed to change. That would have been so much simpler, because mine happened very slowly. The first step of it happened when I got a taste of what a healthy relationship was supposed to, taste like. And I realized that my techniques were not going to work with this one. And that scared the shit out of me, because then I was like really desperate, because I'm like, oh shit, what do I do? Do I have to learn new coping mechanisms? Do I just shut down and be a different person? I don't know how to do this here. And luckily, I was in a foreign country with my newlywed husband, so I didn't have the option of running home to bitch about how awful my situation was to mommy, which may have been fine, but I think it did me good just having to stick it out. I don't really even know what it was that changed my mind, where it's like, it was kind of like, this, I could do this. I could manipulate people. I could even probably find a decent relationship that I'm like really happy in, and can just like do whatever the hell I want. I really could get that if I really wanted, but part of me didn't want that. Part of me just wanted what was in front of me, which happened to be my husband at the, now he's my husband. But there was something about, like, I keep saying, like, there was something, I don't know what it was. There was just a feeling that there was something different about this situation. And if I didn't at least try to fake it for a while and figure it out, and like just try at it, like I was going to lose something really important. And everything else just seemed like I was just going to be stuck. Like that just, I looked around me and I was like, I don't want to do the same thing that everyone else is doing. And I don't really feel like I am. But, and also the other thing I was going to say is, and this happens with people who've experienced traumatic experiences a lot. I eventually got everything that I wanted. I didn't graduate from high school. I didn't walk across the stage. I didn't go to prom. I went to homecoming and danced with my stepdad. I didn't even wear a dress. I didn't go to sleepovers. I didn't have a normal childhood. And I fought with my parents until they threatened to kick me out, because I wanted to walk across that stage and graduate, even though I was going to be 21 years old by the time I graduated. I was willing to do that just to have that one experience. And finally, I got a boyfriend who, at the time, he was joining the military. And at the time I thought that was like, oh my gosh, you have like a upstanding, respectable job, and, like you're reliable. And he was, he got tricked into the military just as much as everyone, they play on these, right?
They know how to manipulate a certain age demographic.
Yeah.
of what their concerns and desires are at that particular age.
Yeah. But at the time, I was 20 years old and I just saw, reliability and really attractive, and he liked me and he was actually really healthy, and just, things were falling into place. And then I got an amazing mother-in-law, like the perfect mother-in-law who loved me. Never had any problems with her. And then I got the wedding. My mother-in-law asked me to move in when she saw I was having a hard time, and then I got the wedding where all of my family was there, and I got to pick out the dress that I wanted. I got a giant ass diamond ring, which I still love to this day. I got to pick it out myself. I flew to Korea and spent the first year with my husband in a foreign country, and I just felt like I had the world at the tip of my fingers. And then there'd be nights where I'm just getting piss ass drunk to be able to sleep. And these feelings, like these intense emotional feelings would come up, and it was such a contrast that I realized it's like I had everything that I wanted, but there was still something that it didn't fix. It didn't fix me. And it took me a lot of years trying to self-medicate with multiple things. Someone referred to it as being a garbage junkie. Like anything. I don't care what it is. Get me high a little bit. I stayed away from the harder stuff because I was terrified of getting addicted, because I know how I am. But I spent many years, and it wasn't until maybe 5 or 6 years ago that I really started actually making any progress. And I actually ended up cutting off like all my work friends. I didn't add you to Facebook or any of my pages. You didn't come to my house. I isolated myself between this is my home life, and then there's all you fucks out there. That's just kind of how I felt. And I got a really good friend.
I know exactly what you're saying.
I got one really good friend, my best friend, Nicole. And the first night we met, I met her husband actually at work, and he was like, you got to meet my girlfriend. She came out and she smoked the same cigarettes as I did, which was cool. And then we started talking about parenting, and I was like, do you spank your kids? And she goes, absolutely not. It's child abuse. And I was like, I want to hug you so much right now, because I feel like I'm around someone who understands how I feel about things. And I don't know, from that point on, like once I quit that job and discovered anarchy, my husband had discovered anarchy and voluntarism, and that kind of really like spurred it on, where it's like, oh, okay, this is the path that I kind of want to adventure down and see how it is. But yeah, it took me a lot of years and a lot of confusion, and I'm so envious. I wish that I could have just woken up one day and be like, you know what, this isn't working for me anymore.
Well, unfortunately, no, I think it isn't just one day. It's like it's always like, just like taking the red pill. It's not just one day that everything is, it's like every day is a red pill day, And,
okay. I have a good analogy for this. You like ice cream, right? Yeah. Willow? Yeah? Could you eat all the ice cream you're going to eat in the next year tomorrow?
Absolutely not, because that's one of
because it would be more than your body weight. That's why.
Well, that, and also, like, we should have used a different analogy. You should have said cheesecake.
Well, that's even
because
worse.
I would attempt that. I would attempt to eat a year's worth of cheesecake in 24 hours, and I can guarantee you that I would not win.
Whose year's worth of cheesecake? My year's worth of cheesecake or yours?
What is your idea of a cheesecake? I don't discriminate. All cheesecakes are beautiful in my mouth.
I've got a particular affinity to cheesecake too. All right, but I guess the bottom line of what I'm saying is,
come on. Oh yeah, sorry, ethics. Never mind.
Is with this experience that I had, and kind of in all these different experiences I had, it allowed me to see, a lot of conflict and a lot of traumatic experiences, for what they are. And so as I look around the world today, as I look into businesses and I see different environments, it's really easy for me to see this stuff, because I when you're fighting with people all the time, you do get this, you really do get very good at kind of reading people's nonverbal communication, you know, and in a lot of cases you can kind of fool them into like backing down because, you know, you look like you're crazy or something like that. Those kind of things became kind of inherent to me. So, you know, I think to a large part, maybe this is why I value Agnieszka's work so much, is because you know, it's this kind of something inside me that identifies that as, you know, as extremely valuable. But, you know, like what Willow was saying, you know, she got all the things she wanted, but it still wasn't fixed. And that's another thing that I've identified with, you know, so many people that I've worked with and been around is, you know, they have all these nice things, yet they're totally screwed up, you know. And so again, it's like, well, how do I fix that, you know? And so that this there again is kind of why I created this method, is because it is kind of a way to kind of figure out the puzzle. And so the second step, after we get through journaling and kind of identifying some of the things about ourselves that maybe we're not aware of, the next thing is called meaningful communication. And the idea is to kind of create an environment where you can talk to another person in a meaningful way. And some people call this big talk as opposed to small talk, but there's methodologies to getting across to people and getting across to people rather quickly that, hey, I'm here to talk to you meaningfully. You know, I'm serious. there's very few people that can get that thing across. And, you know, there's a couple different techniques, and even, you know, something that Richard put out, but I'll mention a few of them. And what I would call these are kind of developing keys that you can use to unlock the situation and really get to communicating with people. And kind of like that, you know, old Western sheriff that doesn't come up with a gun. Well, how in the heck does he, you know, get people to talk to him? Is he's using different keys. And so like one is, you know, this idea of starting with strengths, like figuring out what people's strengths are and then utilizing that to, you know, engage in a conversation. Another is kind of creating a personal vulnerability where you talk honestly about yourself and then you invite the other person to be honest as well. And so, you know, I've kind of experimented with this, and I've experimented with some of the people that I've worked with. And it's amazing how quickly this can get done. And you can kind of create a statement that's about 15 to 20 seconds long. And you can just kind of start unlocking people as you're walking around. And as you use it more and as you practice it on a regular basis, you get really good at being able to, like, you know, just be honest about what your situation is. And then allow other people to respond to that, you know, in a kind of, in a very kind of nourishing mindset where, you know, you're like inviting people to, like, you know, dump, you know, something that's important to them on you. This is something that when I was in construction, you know, I was kind of a hardcore guy, and, you know, construction, you've got to be kind of a tough guy to, you know, get things done. But as I was able to, you know, kind of enlighten people about what I really, you know, that I actually cared about things, and I cared about where they're, you know, where they were going, I got a lot of input from a lot of people that, you know, most people would just never even think about, you know, having a conversation with them, you know. And luckily for me, like, construction is one in which, you know, I deal with everybody. I deal with everybody from politicians to, you know, mafia figures and all kinds of other things. And, you know, it worked across the board, you know, so it worked with a lot of different people. So let me ask you guys, does that, I mean, that's obviously that sounds pretty valuable, but what are your thoughts on that?
I feel that's it seems to be a logical step. You know, if you're starting out with writing, journaling, and expressing, which is an opportunity, as I see it, to express yourself on an emotional level, but also on an intellectual level, and even to cut through something that's beyond even the emotional and the intellectual level, as you are, in a way, channeling is maybe not the right word to hit, but it brings the opportunity of breaking your conditioning. So I feel that's like one powerful tool to break through conditioning and to bring things to the light that not even yourself are aware of usually. And then I feel that what you just described would be the next logical step of after having resolved and brought to the light to yourself, to your own self, a kind of conditioning or a condition that you are under, that you then are able to express that and to see and recognize that in others as well, and to help yourself and to help others to break through conditioning that's hindering yourself and others of progress. So it seems to be like the next logical step on the ladder, so to say. It makes sense to me.
I found it really useful because it mirrors something that I'm doing for my clients currently. We've been talking about trauma bonding and how trauma bonding, when you're completely alone, or like trauma bonding is essentially seeking out the experience of the negative experiences and feelings just for the sake of it, for the sake of reliving it, re-experiencing it, and maybe even divulging a little bit of pleasure out of it. That can sound strange to people, but it does happen, and it's more common than you think. And how it's easy to find friends who you can trauma bond with, and then eventually you realize that nothing's ever getting fixed. And so that is when we switch over from trauma bonding to intentional conversation. And this is like me going to a friend and saying, hey, I think I had a flashback last night and it was really heavy. I need to talk about it. It's going to be very uncomfortable. I might cry. I might, have this reaction. But I want to just talk about it so that someone else knows about it. Maybe you can give me some feedback on if you've ever had this experience. So you're seeking out something healthy, and you know that you're seeking out a healthy thing. And that's where like the mindful communication ties in with like the intentional conversation. And this is to help you from accidentally overloading on the cashier when she asks you how your day is. And you're like, well, the list is really long.
But we can't do that anymore because of the current situation.
Social distancing
anymore.
Yeah, which is actually making it worse because now all of these people who don't have anyone to go like rant and overwhelm, they're just keeping it to themselves. Like, I'm thinking about all of the, like, as when I went to beauty school, and like, I'm not kidding, those people tell you their deepest, darkest secrets, like everyone that's having an affair. All these secrets that are not being told, they're not being communicated, like all of these people who are actually seeking out an interaction, a social interaction with someone instead of just a monetary interaction or I'm just going to get something.
I don't think you can have affairs anymore. Social distancing would not allow it.
I think you can,
That's
but
healthy.
Maybe you have to like both be tested or something.
And then how do you explain the test results to your actual partner? I don't know, affairs are, I think, thing of the past.
So you mean it's not true that it's healthy if you keep distance to others, which is what they taught my 7-year-old today.
Wait. Are you arguing pro affairs or pro social distancing?
I'm gonna say the only good thing about this social distancing thing is the people who previously did not understand physical boundaries, they kind of understand it a little bit more now. I don't like the fact that like we're all mandated that we stay 6 feet away from each other, but I am also reassured that the idea of maintaining a little bit of space and not being like up someone's butt crack that you don't know is nice to me. I hate it when like people behind you in the grocery line and they're breathing down your neck, or they just like can't stop moving towards you, and you're like, Like, do I
or
need
on a
bubbles
bus
to keep you?
I
Get me started
can
on men on
appreciate.
buses.
You guys don't even know what it's like. You're not my height. You're not my height. Don't mention to me about
no,
being
we're
close
not crotch
proximity to
height.
artists.
That would be
Please.
horrible.
I am 5'2".
It is.
I am 5'2". There is a whole world up there that I don't even know about. I can't see it.
Yeah, but she's like a foot shorter
If
than
you're like
you.
on a train or a bus or something, and you're
You
like there,
can't
and
be.
it's just like there's just like,
Not
holy
white.
crap, I'm being shadowed. I swear I can't even see any lights anymore. There's too many tall people.
That's why I loved South Korea, because for the first time in my life, the first and only time in my life, I have ever had to worry about ducking through a doorway. I felt really bad for tall people. I was like, do you hit your head on everything?
No, for them it was chest height.
I would personally never discriminate against hobbits. I always watch out for them.
Hobbits.
We make
yeah.
good food.
Well, I was going to mention something that Richard mentioned actually in Friday's lecture that I thought was really kind of pertinent to this particular thing about meaningful communication. And that was, he said, you know, a lot of the problems that we're facing as a society has to do with the fact that we don't have any good salesmen anymore. You know, that people don't know how to sell. And, you know, the idea that is acronym for the SELL, you know, the be sincere, be encouraging, listen and learn and love, that is the way to sell, you know, but, you know, care about people, care about what it is that they need and, you know, the things that they desire, and be able to help them get, you know, something valuable for them, you know. That is another way of meaningful communication that, again, we all see as being, you know, almost non-existent, you know. So again, these are things that are really, you know, habits and practices that all we've got to do is practice more regularly. And now we start to see how much more ability we have when we have that skill set to deliver things.
How do you talk to people? I know how I do it when I'm doing therapy or when I'm connecting with people. I almost go, my listening is almost like my world doesn't matter. My time is just all for you. Whatever it is going on, it is just my reality too. Right now it's just all about you.
Deirdre, can you cover the microphone a little bit? It's hard to hear you because there's too much wind. That's not what we meant.
Not cover your head.
Now you're upside down. I don't know what's going on.
She's in Wonderland.
She is in Wonderland. I just meant like to cup your hand around the microphone part of the.
Did that work?
It may not, because
I'll tell you
cell phone
what.
microphones.
I think it's a little better.
A tiny bit.
No, not really. It's
okay.
better than, yeah, I don't have a lot of options. It's either here or it's echoey, like seriously echoey in my house, or I don't know.
Once you unpack, it'll be less echoey because all the stuff will absorb sound.
I didn't even know where I packed my microphone. I thought I named the box, but apparently I didn't even name the box. I just put my room. Maybe I was going to expect to unpack it all at once.
I've ended up moving so many times that I don't even bother like writing what's in the box unless it's like, this will break if you're not careful with it.
Well, Deirdre, you mentioned how do I talk to people? I'll give you a little example. It's my little elevator. It's my little elevator statement that I think usually kind of helps me unlock, you know, something into a more meaningful conversation. And that is the statement, I care about what I do and I care about the people I do it with, and I leave the rest to fall into place. And I usually add something, you know, that is from the conversation to make that more continuous. But it works so magically in a lot of cases, you know, where I can say, I care about the things that I do, and I care about you, you know, and it sounds to me like you're having a problem or something like that, you know. And so just like for someone to hear that and kind of see that I'm sincere, I think it does open a lot of doors that otherwise, aren't open for a lot of people. Unfortunately, I'm in Mexico, so they don't. They go.
Literally, I'm gonna go. It's gonna start raining. I really have to.
Okay.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
All right, bye, Deidre.
Can't get caught out in the rain. So I actually, about 2 days ago, I shared a little story on Facebook that I think really ties into what you were saying, because I commented at the top and I said, it's amazing what can be accomplished when you take what people say seriously instead of acting on what you believe is happening. Yeah. So this story is, I'm going to read it. It says, I'm not a doctor, but I was working as a paramedic at a music festival when we got called to a kid tripping on who knows what. The guy had climbed to the top of a portable generator stadium light. He's 20 feet in the air on a light pole, staring into this blazing sun, screaming, I'm a moth, go into the flame. We had several cops, firefighters, and myself standing at the base for 30 minutes trying to discuss how to get him down without killing us. The crowd is surrounding. They're trying to figure out if they need a ladder or a truck. How do they get him down? Do they spray him with mace? What if he falls? And says, all of a sudden, this greasy-looking janitor walks up, turns off the power to the generator, turns on his flashlight, aims it at the Mothman. The dude looks at the flashlight on the ground, scrambles down, and falls to the medical tent like a puppy about to get a snack. And I was like, duh. Because he took him seriously. He was like, all right, dude, you're a moth. Here's your flame. Come to me. Like, you just take him seriously. And this is a lesson that I learned very young from the movie Patch Adams, where the guy is in a mental ward, and it's how he realizes he wants to help people. His roommate is terrified of the killer squirrels that are rampaging the room. So he runs over and he flips the bed over and he's like, all right, where are they? I have an imaginary gun. I'll take him out. And just starts like, this guy tells him where he is, and he just like shoots him. He just believes him. He totally believes him. And then the situation was over because all the squirrels are dead and there's nothing to be afraid of anymore.
That's what they say when they say meet the client where they're at.
Yeah.
Boys?
I was going to try and prepare for a screen share because I absolutely, that's certainly 100% of what I'm talking about is kind of creating the circumstance where people can kind of give you what they care about or let you, communicate what they need to communicate. It's an important thing to be able to do. And there's a lot of different ways and methods that can be done. And again, this is kind of one of the things that as I've worked with people, I've found that it's different for different people. So it isn't always the same. And that's kind of why I've always tried to work with one person at a time rather than try and make it a group activity or try and do a lot of training with a lot of people, is because it is kind of situation based. And it's, once the light turns on, then but until that point, it's really difficult to get people like en masse to just adopt this idea. I think there is a TED talk that talks about big talk, and they talk about like, if this was your last day, what would you do? If you knew you were going to die tomorrow, what would you do? And that they go out and interview people asking them that question, and they get a lot of much more meaningful communication. But the idea is to kind of create that circumstance where people can turn that switch on. Let me share my screen, and I'm going to go back to my fish. And I know my art isn't the greatest, but this is kind of a little a little visual aid that I use to kind of help people really understand that the basis of what I'm talking about. And the idea of the fish is really kind of this underwater mentality. it's being in the lower consciousness. It's being stuck in fear and apathy or guilt or shame. Any of these things that, the media constantly beats on. And so that kind of represents the fish. But what if you're actually a bird, and that's the bird up on top, but you're living down there by the fish, and you've been told you're a fish all your life, and you wonder why life is so hard. But the reality is it's just the environment you've put yourself in, and that's kind of that using the human mind to solve the problems that you have can take you out of that fish and put you into that bird. And that's the thing, is when you've lived a life as a fish and you realize that you're actually a bird, then it's like, oh my God, my potential is so unbelievable. I don't even know how to describe it. Let's see if I can turn this thing off now. Damn it. It's not working.
I had issues with that when I tried to screen share with Agnieszka with one of our meetings, and it just sat on my screen for like 10 minutes. It was really annoying.
All right. I see what the problem was. All right.
Oh, I was about to fix it for you, but.
Yeah. Well, thank you. But, this idea of being a bird, but actually living as a fish is really kind of, something that, and again, Agnieszka is certainly a great example of being able to read people's body language. This is also something you can hear in their, in the way they describe themselves and the situations that they're having. If they're talking about things that they're angry about, if they're fearful, it's like they're a bird living as a fish, and to me, it becomes really obvious. And, then it's how do I connect with them to make them aware that it's pretty obvious that you're acting like you're a fish. And yeah, it's tough to be a bird living underwater.
It's like the whole meeting. Agnieszka just said, you have to meet the clients or people or friends. You have to meet them where they are. So I feel that is like a entry point, because on that scale that you just showed, we are, at different points, maybe at different points of our lives, or different stages, even of our day of the year. So to meet people where they are, I feel that's the opportunity of finding an entry point, but where the goal is really to guide them, to make them understand, or to bring to their awareness who they really are. Because if you don't meet them where they are, you're not really meeting them at all, because then you're going to talk a language, that's different. They can't hear what you say, even if they physically hear you, but they, it doesn't reach there. So the different things that we went through the past weeks and months, of adapting the way how we talk, how we express ourselves, the different techniques that we have, I think they speak to that. It's like they give us a range of techniques and of possibilities to find out where the perceived other is in that moment, and how to talk and how to connect in a meaningful way, and in a way that the other will understand as well. And the goal, I feel, is to cut through to who they really are, and to speak from who we really are, and to make that connection then. So basically to cut through our layers of the onion, and also to find a way how to cut through the layers of the onion of the other, and then to make that straight connection from source to source, or from the essence to the essence.
And you succeeded in that, Mike, because Oscar liked your graphic.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I'm looking for a little graphic help in regard to, making that a little more pretty. But, for the time being, it brings across the thing. And that's one of the, if you look at that graphic detail, there's a lot of different things to that. I just kind of threw it all in there because I wanted to, make it one in which, there's a lot of different reasoning behind why that analogy works so well. And, you know, like above water is like your needs are being met versus your needs are being unmet. So when someone says to me, you know, I can't get anything done. I'm hungry. I can't pay my bills or whatever. Your needs aren't getting met. I understand where you're at, you know, or, you know, I'm lacking energy. It just seems like I'm like walking in mud. Yeah. Well, you don't have any energy. Yeah. I can understand that, you know. And then kind of creating that understanding, it's I think it's a powerful way to kind of introduce the idea. The third area that I talk about is called digging deep, and this is one in which I'm really trying to introduce them to the habits of like using logic and reason to like dissect either their problem within themselves or a subject matter or something they want to find out about. It's, you know, like if you think about the trivium, you know, there's grammar, there's logic, there's rhetoric. And so like dissecting those backwards and forwards, you know, and using the what is it? What's the two levels of thinking where you're taking it apart and putting it back together? Somebody help me here.
Oh, I have the words right at the tip of my tongue, but they're not coming to me. Autodidactic? No, that's self-taught, self-teaching. But I think it's another A word. Richard would know.
Yeah, and Richard was actually just pointing this out the other day, where he had that little diagram where it was like a circle, and it was like, shoot. But in any case, you know, it's digging deep. It's like,
oh, Oscar says inductive and deductive.
There you go.
He was paying attention in that lecture.
Oscar, we're loving you, man. much appreciation for helping us out. Yeah, so yeah, creating the inductive and deductive reasoning and being able to go through that. And as you do it for like a subject area, you can also do it for yourself. And there's a lot of different things that can kind of create the circumstance where like digging deep is a way to like kind of reveal to yourself your own blind spots. And again, these are things that I've experienced myself in the military, also in construction, and even I was just talking to my younger brother the other day, and he was talking about he's going to he's doing an online course at Notre Dame for a business certificate, and they're talking about the known and unknown in regard to what we know versus what other people know, and how that can impact like our ability to do things. Because if we think we know something and other people that are influential know that we don't know that, and then we try and expound that to other people, but they look to the influential people, we've lost it, you know. And so like just going through that exercise of saying, okay, do I know what I know or do I not know? And then integrating that with other people and asking questions with other people. That's a level, that's a exercise of what I would call digging deep, where you might be able to uncover something where you assumed that you knew something. And then when you actually found somebody that knew what it was, and then like a little light bulb goes off in your head and you're like, oh my God, thanks so much for, you know, letting me know that, you know, and then maybe something else makes sense, you know. That's what I would call digging deep. And it is, again, it's like a habit or a practice that you can do on a daily basis, that as you get better doing it, you become so much better at finding the things that, you know, what I would consider your blind spots or your weaknesses. And you know, it makes it so much easier not to, in some degrees, humble yourself, but also be understanding of other people, you know, and being able to like accept that they don't see that they're being like a jackass, or they're being triggered, or, you know, or they are just plain angry all the time, you know.
I think jackass and triggered are the same thing. Maybe.
They can be.
And people are not usually jackass for no reason, or are they? Maybe.
Well, I mean, you would still be triggered. So if the jackass part of you comes out to avoid certain situations, and then that part realizes that if it just stays around, we don't have those situations anymore, it turns into like a manager. So it wouldn't necessarily need to be triggered in the sense that like, oh, I'm triggered, I have so many emotions. It could be like a slight like, nope, this isn't going to happen again, so I'm going to go ahead and just be a jackass. So it could be like an
So like my ex-husband saying, that sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. That would be an example of just being a jackass like that.
It depends on
Could
what
be.
situation.
Oh, and that was his favorite phrase.
Yeah, then probably that's yeah. That's I don't want to deal with this situation, and this is how I know how to get it out of it.
Oh, see, I always interpret it as I'm a child, and I don't want to grow up.
Well, there again is, like when people are, I think this is called the 4 states of consciousness, which is like the first stage is like, I'm a victim. And that's also reflected in that fish diagram I've got, but it's, everything it's somebody else that's making my life screwed up. That's like the lowest state of consciousness, And so like when people are portraying themselves as victims, they're revealing themselves as in that lower state of consciousness. And there again is like a way where you can kind of turn the mirror and say, this is who you are. Can you see this? Is this what you said? Because that's what that is,
So
and
I was going to point, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm just mumbling.
It's easy to see the people who play victim. The symptoms, the signs that are there. And if you know what to look for, it's easy. I think what can be harder are the people who scream in their mind, I will not be a victim. And they end up doing the bully thing to protect themselves. So it's kind of like the fish or the pike who repeatedly slams his head against the wall. Who's to say that his mentality isn't, you know what? I'm not going to be the victim again. I'm not going to hit my head against that wall because I'm not going to do that to myself. And not even recognizing that you're doing something bad to yourself by starving yourself of this thing that you clearly needed before. Yeah. So it can go to the other side where it's like, you don't even think that you're a victim because you've created this wall around you to keep everyone out, and to be angry when that wall is crossed and you're doing yourself a disservice just as well. Even though you think that you're not being a victim, you're still acting like a victim because at one point you were victimized and you didn't recognize it, and then you never got to leave that situation.
And a key point is that it's that the actions in the present would be rooted in what happened in the past. So that when the wall was there, it's like you're assuming that the wall still is there. So you kind of lost connection to what is in that moment. So it's like whatever was, yesterday or 5 minutes ago, in your mind, you're still recreating it and you're still holding on to that. And that blurs your perception of reality because, the fish was not able to perceive that, the wall is actually not there. So he continues to live what was in the past, but which actually not necessarily would influence his presence, but so he kind of creates, he artificially creates a reality that actually is not. So that's an interesting line of thought for me, because like how much of the so-called reality that we live in or that we perceive in this moment is created by us, and are we creating it to our benefit, or are we creating it because we are under some kind of spell or conditioning? So
that's the whole topic. Are you a fish or are you not a fish?
Yeah.
There's a Polish proverb or saying that my mom used to say, and it was, in spite of grandma, I'm going to get frostburn on my ears. Or to spite grandma, I'm going to get frostburn on my ears.
You know, that was something that was used against me. I'm just remembering this. And I never liked it because
Are your parents Polish too?
No, my grandmother is Southern Baptist. And
it's the same thing, Wallace.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Right.
There was one day, I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was the shorts I was wearing. It really doesn't matter, but I just was not necessarily in a good mood. And I don't eat breakfast on the regular. And she just made me breakfast because we were staying with her. Didn't ask me if I wanted anything. And I was not upset. I was just like, I don't want breakfast. And she immediately went to, you don't want breakfast. You're starving yourself to get back at me for, doing this. And I was like, whoa. I am not your daughter. Let's get this straight. I am like 17 years old. We don't have a really great relationship. I just came back into your life. You think you know me so well that you think I care about getting back at you by starving myself? Like, no, trust me. I can be as mad as you as I possibly could be. And I guarantee you pop a pudding cup in front of my face right there, and I'm going to still look at you like with a stink eye, and I'm going to eat the whole cup. Like, I never understood that mentality of I'm going to spite you by making myself feel worse. Like, that doesn't, I don't know. That makes me feel really disgusted, to be honest. And I don't know where that reaction really comes from, but I noticed that some people have this reaction, and I'm like, I just don't get it. I don't get how that is spiting them.
Well, again, it's like, a lot of people, how poorly they treat others, it is a reflection of how poorly they see themselves and how they treat themselves. And that is something that we've really got to be aware of, that, everybody suffers. And, I guess misery loves company in a lot of cases is another good statement, that, it is like the crabs in the bucket scenario. And, I guess fishes can be crabs too, but the bottom line is that we've got to see the problem for what it is. And certainly a lot of the things that are being reflected by what people do, even in their nonverbal actions, are really a great deal of information about who they are, not necessarily anything about who you are, And so that's kind of a wrap up of all these three things. I would say that in regard to the digging deep, one of the things that is an exercise is kind of developing your own personal philosophy. And this is how the ethical part of the ethical emergence comes about, is really, ethics is about, philosophy, and it's about the kind of like figuring out the right and the wrong. And that's also about like seeing clearly, what is harmful and what is valuable, and being able to discern that kind of stuff more readily. Like the fish that's in the thing, it's been trained to not eat the minnow, has to be more discerning about the situation. Like as the situation changes and as you start to get hungrier, maybe you got to start thinking about approaching this a different way to solve the problem. An animal with that kind of a broken will isn't going to do that. But for a human, we've got a lot more resources available to us that can create the circumstance where we look at the situation and consider the different things that are going on. This is something I'm going to get into on Wednesday. Is I've been looking into this thing called general semantics, and certainly the fish story comes from my research into that. But there's something else that I found. It's called time binding, and the guy that's behind it, Alfred Korzybski, came up with this concept of what makes
you really
a human.
Like Polish people, eh?
Yeah, I guess I do. I've got some connection with Polish people. In fact, maybe, my family actually came from Prussia, and, a lot of Poland was Prussia at one time. So who knows? But in any case, Korzybski says that what makes a human is what he calls, we're time binders. animals being space binders and plants being energy binders. Time binders means that, like, if we understand, if we learn from our experience, and then we're able to pass that wisdom on to other people, then we advance our society and everybody becomes wiser. And so this is kind of something that I'm going to approach in Wednesday's thing, is this idea of, how we connect to other people.
Wednesday's show.
Wednesday's show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and by the way, the title of that show is called Conjuring the Magic of Collaboration.
Ooh, that sounds cool.
I love that title.
Clever title.
I love that title. That's a good title. Today's title was good too. I liked it. People liked it. It's good.
Yeah. Well, I've got all you guys to thank for creating these titles, because I didn't have it at the beginning.
Well, your original title, Are You a Fish or Not, was good too.
Well, we kind of worked it in there. You understood the idea.
It's all good.
Well, it was a great title. We just didn't want to offend
fish
anyone.
Oh, right.
We don't want to offend
the people
Jamaicans.
of Jamaica.
Yeah, because we're not privy to slang, and so we were like, well, I don't want anyone to misinterpret.
It's true. I
Luckily,
hope the
we had
people
an
of
inside
Jamaica
guy
are
on
laughing now. Now the Dennis will have to send to his people in Jamaica this episode so that they can listen to the end and hear the mention.
It's appropriate now.
Anyway, I think
so.
That's pretty much a wrap.
We're gonna wrap it up.
Yeah.
I do want to mention we do have a website, raisingexcellence.live. You can check out a little bit more information about us. I know, Agnieszka, I was actually looking through our profiles, and you've put together your profile. So we're all going to have to get on board with that in the near future. But Agnieszka's profile, has everybody saw that? It is freaking awesome. Any of our audience might want to check that out, see what you think. Give us a little feedback. See, is it helpful? Is it useful? Maybe there's something we could add.
Yeah, maybe you want to know more about us. Let us know.
Absolutely.
Get your face read.
We are on YouTube. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter, Periscope. Is there anything else?
Not yet, but we might be. I was approached by somebody who wanted us to be on Instagram.
Just look for us everywhere. Everywhere you go, just look for us.
Just look
for the excellence.
Or just raise your own excellence and have us in your heart.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if any of this resonates with you, feel free to let us know. We're always looking to help people, and certainly in this environment that we have, there's going to be a lot of mental health issues ahead, unfortunately, and we'd like to try and avoid as many of those as possible. And so if one of us resonates with what you're thinking, feel free to connect. Our show times are Mondays and Wednesdays now. We start at 7:05 p.m. Eastern time. So catch us on Mondays and Wednesdays. And I think that's a wrap. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time and attention. And again, I really hope this was helpful.
All right, I'm going to play the outro now, all right? Everybody ready? Bye!
Bye!
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. See you Wednesday.